Hello all, we are once again here at the AXA Training Centre in Liverpool after Arne Slot's pre-match press conference ahead of the game on Sunday against Chelsea. Now normally I start this by saying Arne Slot was in a good mood, he was cracking jokes with the journalists, smiling and everything, and to a certain extent that's true, but this was the first time I felt like he came here with an idea. He wanted to certainly put some ideas out into the ether, one of whom was about his captain. He gave a very robust defence of Virgil Van Dijk in comparison to some of the criticism he's faced back home in Holland for his performances and the red card in the international break. But also, once again, he reiterated his upset at playing Wednesday in Europe and then playing the lunchtime kickoff. And he actually linked it to the injury that Alisson received in that game against Crystal Palace. And it was interesting because to a certain extent he was clarifying the comments he made both pre and post match, but also he really wanted to push that point home. He really wanted the Premier League to maybe have a look at it, and he compared it to the situation in Holland where all teams who are playing in the Champions League are then allowed to play on the Sunday in the league, and the league over there protects them to a certain extent, whereas here the expectation is you've got a big enough squad, you have to deal with it. So a fascinating development really to see how Arne Slot wants to flex that particular muscle. Now there's plenty of other things he mentioned including team news, but I'll delve into that once we're back in the lab. Hello everyone, we are back in the lab, so it's time for me to expand on some of the topics that Arne Slot mentioned in that pre-Chelsea press conference. The first one I want to discuss is Alisson. He was asked to elaborate on the injury. He'd only really spoken about it in the post-match press conference after Palace. He kind of reiterated what he said there in that it was a blow, but that we're lucky that we've got such a great backup keeper in Queen Kelleher. He's been fantastic every time he's come in. He was asked also later in the press conference about the recurrence of these Alisson injuries and what's being done, and he said that although it was rare that a goalkeeper gets so many injuries, he has suffered it before. His previous goalkeeper at final, Virgil, he had very similar issues. And I found this whole conversation really interesting because one of the things that we were told ahead of Slot and his team coming in was how good they were at managing injuries. And this is really going to be the first real test of that situation. They said that obviously they're doing everything they can do, which what else would he say? But some of the other things that he said later on, he kind of regretted that he didn't play Kelleher against Palace, which maybe tells us that perhaps even when Alisson does come back to full fitness, that we might be seeing Kelleher a little bit more. He might be being used a little bit to try and protect Alisson. Now, Slot also did kind of mention that there were a few issues of players returning from international breaks, but he didn't specify. Now, those of you who have been paying attention will know that both Costa Tsimikas and Wataru Endo missed games for their country, but those were both illness related. There has been a bug around the club over the last couple of weeks, and I'm sure that was related to that. Obviously, we knew about McAllister and the injury he has being managed, but the suspicion was, the way that Slot mentioned it, that it wasn't necessarily any of those three who've come back. What he did say though is that today will be the first day that any of them really get a chance to train, so they'll know who can and can't play after training today. But as much as it's the kind of thing that makes all Liverpool fans nervous, I think considering that we know that both Salah and Van Dijk came back from international break in early, which makes me think it's not going to be either of those two, you really only say it's maybe Diogo Jota who could be out. That would give you real cause for concern. With all other players, I believe that the backups are very, very good and very capable of coming in and doing a job in this massive game. That's not to say Darwin Núñez couldn't do a job. I just think that with Jota, it's a little bit more the way that Liverpool play, the game plan, the intelligence, sort of spoken about so much, that will be missed if he's not there. Now, the thing that surprised me the most, and probably the biggest headline to come out of this press conference, is that Slot once again made reference to the difficulty in playing a midweek game on a Wednesday in Europe and following that up with the lunchtime kickoff. Now, obviously this is kind of music to my ears because this was something that I kind of first came to him with, but the interesting part for me, the fascinating part to begin with, is that his answer started as a clarification, because some people may have seen there'd been a little bit of a contradiction between what he said to me in the press conference pre-match and then what he said afterwards, having experienced the injuries to both Alisson and McAllister. Some people may have said, oh, you're contradicting yourself there. So he wanted to clarify what he meant is that he has no problem with 12:30 kickoffs. The problem he has is 12:30 kickoffs after a Wednesday game. Now, my point to him was that it's a surprise, perhaps, that the Premier League rules only really account for playing away from home on the Wednesday game. They don't really take into account whether you're home or away in the league game. Now, Slot, when I originally spoke to him about it, he referenced the way things are done in Holland, and once again that came up again today, and he mentioned about how the Dutch teams are very much protected by their FA. They're all allowed to play on the Sunday, and it was fascinating the way the Slot answered it again. It was very much like, here in England, you're told you've just got such big squads, you just got to get on with it. Again, like, kind of a reference to the fact that that's kind of what a lot of fans say, particularly fans of other clubs. They say, oh, well, you should be able to handle it. You've got all these multi-million-pound players in your squad. It should be fine. Well, it is and it isn't, I think, to be fair to the man. He's still early days in his tenure. He's still working out exactly who can and who can't be relied upon at certain times and in certain games. But once again, it was another reference to maybe he is going to have to start rotating more. So we'll have to see how that goes. But managers are very clever. They know exactly when what they say is going to make headlines. And I think that he was very happy for that phrase to come out there and allow it to be made a headline. What normally happens though when you get a situation like this is that now other managers in other press conferences will be asked similar questions, they're asked to respond to what Slot said, and then maybe the story will run, and that's how you really do start to put pressure on the powers that be in the Premier League and the FA. So we'll have to wait and see whether or not anything like that does happen in this case. Slot was also asked about Chelsea, and he was very effusive in his praise of them. I mean, it's a bit of a strange situation at Chelsea. There was all that kind of criticism and condemnation of the way they've gone about things in the summer transfer window and windows past, with basically stockpiling players and then suddenly having to put together a fire sale, throw them out here, there and everywhere. But Slot was having none of that. He's not really going to comment on the way that they're going about things. He's just going to comment on what he sees from his team and on the pitch. And he was adamant that this is going to be a team that's going to be a big threat for the top 3 or 4 places, which tells me that he's taking this game very, very seriously. It's the it's the second big Sunday game that he's had to face with Liverpool. Obviously, Liverpool went to Old Trafford. It's easy to forget that, considering how easy that game ended up being. But no, that was a test, and this will be a test as well. He was asked specifically about Chelsea's ability on the road and how this is going to be the toughest test he's had to face. The thing that I liked about what Slot said to this here was that he acknowledged Chelsea have been good, and he acknowledged that they've got good individuals, but he kind of stressed that it was more about the structure, the tactics and the game plan that would actually decide this game. He referenced Wolves, who are at the bottom of the table but actually gave us a lot of trouble because of the specifics of their game plan. So there's going to be no resting on the laurels. There's not going to be, oh well, we'll just throw 3 people at Cole Palmer and it'll be fine. This is a whole team effort, I think, that we're going to see on Sunday, and there's got to be, in both attack and defence, a real joined up thinking. Speaking of tactics, this kind of relates into the question that I asked Arne Slot, which you can hear about now. Hi Arne, I'm curious as to how you spend your time over this international break, because we've spoken quite a few times about the intense period to come, but also we are 10 games into your tenure and other team analysts and coaches have now got plenty of data to understand the tactics and tendencies of Arne Slot's Liverpool and try to find ways to counteract them. So with that in mind and the period to come, I'm interested, did you want to give yourself a bit of a mental break, a bit of a reset, or have you been hunkered down trying to counteract all the counteractions?
I think a bit of both, but it starts off with the first thing you said, take a mental break. That's why I think it's so normal that Virgil didn't stay with the team, but came back. Because at certain moments, managers but also players need these mental breaks. It's not that it's too hard for us physically, but especially not for me because I'm not playing, but mentally it is sometimes, it asks a lot from you. But I think I came back on Tuesday, back to Liverpool. Yeah, then you start thinking about Chelsea, thinking about Leipzig, thinking about what we have to improve, what other teams can try to come up with. So it's a bit of both, but if I'm back home, I'm quite good in then not thinking about football. Although it's never completely out of your head, but more than it is when I'm here.
So from my perspective, all the questions I've asked Arne Slot so far have been really tactical in nature, and while I have enjoyed his insights that he's given me off the basis of those questions, I wanted to do something a little bit different this time. I wanted to get more of an idea of the man himself, his process, how he goes about things, which is why I asked the question of what he was doing in his downtime and how important does he see it, whether or not to kind of take a bit of a mental break or to be really hunkered down and be trying to find solutions to what might be coming up. And I mean, to his credit, he kind of did both. But I was quite pleased to see him talk about how important it is to take time away, and how even though it's hard for him to completely switch off, he does understand the importance of it. Because sometimes when a manager comes into a new job, particularly a bigger job, you can feel like there's a little bit of desperation to impress, and they want to put out the idea that every minute and every second of every day is important for them to be able to find solutions, to be able to work as hard as he can to find what is going on. But there's an ease about Slot, there's an aura about him that says, I know that what I do is good enough. I don't need to go out of my way or to try and impress anybody. And again, he's preaching a good work-life balance, which I think is great for all of us. Hopefully you think it'll be great for the squad as well. Now, one person he did reference in that answer was Virgil van Dijk, and how pleased he was that Virgil was able to get a bit of a break and come back early. Unfortunately, the reason for that was a red card in the game for Netherlands against Hungary, and he was asked about the criticism of Virgil back home, and as I suspect most Dutch people are aware of, and even us who aren't, I've kind of got an idea about, since we've been having to deal with this whole situation with Virgil. The Dutch media pretty much like him own, and it's not just like the media either, it's the pundits, it's the former players. Everybody has high standards, let's say, in the Dutch national media about their national team. But I'd like to think that it was a little bit of a message to the folks back home. He's already put a message out to the Premier League and to those here. It was another message to the folks back home to say, hey, you have to understand what kind of a man you have and appreciate him just the way we appreciate him back home. He referenced the fact that there were some players who kind of pulled out of the squad because they were tired, and Virgil never shirks his responsibilities. It was a really robust defence of his skipper, and in another question he was asked about his leadership qualities, and he was really keen to stress that as great as he is on the pitch, and the bits that we see in post-match interviews, bringing the players together for a huddle before the game, the stuff that we don't see on the training ground, he's almost even better. Slot mentioned he is the one that's talking the most in training, he's got the most energy to go with his quality, and that's exactly what you want. You want your main man to be setting the standards every day, every session, and allowing everybody to understand this is the level you have to hit in order to play for Liverpool. So it was a great thing for us all to hear. Hopefully all of that appreciation and joy leads to a new contract. But yeah, I'll wrap it up there. Suffice to say, there was plenty of interesting stuff that came out of this press conference, and hopefully, I'm sure there'll be people who will be eagle-eyedly spotting what goes on in training, looking at the training pictures that come out, trying to work out who is and who isn't available, and maybe try to get some clues as to where we'll sit for the game on Sunday against Chelsea. But personally, I'm confident that we can go out there and we can put on a show. It's going to be a fascinating game, but I'm backing Liverpool once again. Thank you all for watching. There will be more coverage of more press conferences to come. Don't forget, I have now got a Substack where I'll be doing some writing on the subjects of Liverpool and the wider Premier League. So if you don't already, please follow me over there, as well as on all the social media places that I always talk about going to. I'll see you next time.